So coming up next, we've got technology in a new age, which actually follows on nicely from what the guys were speaking about there at EuroLeague. We already have Patrick McMeekin here. He is the UK licensee for SeatServe. And in the next couple of seconds, I'm hopeful, we'll also be having Jake, who's product manager for venue operations at Ungerbuck. So Patrick, just whilst we've obviously got you here, perhaps you could just introduce yourself, tell everyone a bit about SeatServe, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. Hi, Katie. Good afternoon, everyone. Really great day so far. Really enjoyed the content for this new normal that we've all been talking about. As Katie said, I'm Patrick from SeatServe. Hopefully you will have heard of some of the work that we've done, but for those that haven't, we're a mobile ordering platform, and I suppose our USP is that we have a hyper focus on in-seat delivery and specifically, you know, how in-seat delivery can build on the fan experience, can improve the venue's efficiency, so getting more out of the existing infrastructure that exists, and then finally contributing more to that data ecosystem on the back end. That you know, we've mentioned all three of these points, but I think that's a major focus. And look, I don't want to highlight SeatServe as a brand necessarily, but use the concept as a metaphor for other things and other technology in the context of this panel, how technology can overlay what already exists and what the differences in technology are that change not just the way fans behave, but the processes involved in the back end of stadia and how they, you know, we're not talking about incremental efficiencies anymore. We're kind of talking about step changes in how things are done to make operations more efficient from a venue's perspective, which, you know, for me is super exciting. And you know, certainly some of the panels to date have highlighted some of the opportunities. You're on mute, Katie.
I was trying to multitask again, as we already found out earlier today. I'm not very good. I was actually trying to send a message to Jake to say, are you joining us? I'm sure he is. It's probably, I know it's early morning over there in the US. So this is the beauty of virtual. We can't get stuck at airports or you know, train stations anymore, and don't need to worry about you know, sort of delays that way. But technology isn't always our friend either. So I suppose I'll just go ahead and set the scene as to what we're going to be discussing today. Obviously, over the last year, I'm not going to even talk about the challenges that we've all had at hand. There's been some especially interesting ones for those of us with children, because we've had to deal with the homeschooling and haircuts and all of the above. But obviously that's also the same for indeed the sports and entertainment sector. So I think you'll probably agree with this, Patrick. You know, over the last 12 months, I think we've probably fast forwarded, you know, at least 10 years when it comes to technology. You know, I don't think personally that fans are going to want to go back into stadiums or arenas and, you know, wait in queues or use cash. You know, everyone is used to their new normal part of their everyday life, which means contactless, cashless. You know, so surely that is going to have to now translate into when our venues reopen, you know, how we're actually going to want to experience those venues. So perhaps you can just talk us through a bit about what SeatServe's been doing. I know you worked on a couple of test events at Twickenham and Harlequins, sort of in between lockdowns. So maybe you can just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And they were, great experiences for all of us concerned, because it was, we're talking about day zero ideas at the moment. I mean, arguably September last year really was day zero, because it was kind of foisted upon the venues concerned with relatively little notice, and kudos to them for dealing with them in all of the different ways. And, look, specifically from my perspective, it's hard for me not to talk about mobile ordering here, because it really is something that a majority of us have got used to using, whether it be a supermarket, an Amazon locker, or Deliveroo and Uber Eats, or Uber in general. People have got used to ordering things on their phone. And I think what's important about highlighting the difference between that environment and the stadium environment that we're focused on, there's two things, and it was mentioned in a previous panel. It's how it works from a fan's perspective, but it has to also work from the operator's perspective as well. And they're two very, very different challenges. So, for a start, this isn't a office canteen click and collect app where everything's nice and orderly and people come one at a time and pick up their lunches. And, if you were to tell me that the whole office were coming to pick up their food within 15 minutes, then I would be able to say, yeah, okay, that is a comparable product that we can retrofit into the stadium environment. But that doesn't exist everywhere. And I think that's the crux of this challenge, which is technology exists for this concept, but not in the right way, because it is a unique operating environment. Nobody is able to serve 60, 70, 80,000 people at the same time. And it would be entirely uneconomical for them to be able to do so. So the question becomes, how do we build on that technology, or rather than adapt that technology to implement controls that allow the existing infrastructure to be more efficient? Because it was highlighted by the architecture panel earlier. The fact of the matter is you're trying to build a beautiful stadium, an efficient stadium, and one that's sustainable. But at the same time, people just want a beer at half time. It's that there are so many challenges involved. But from my personal experience, I believe that this isn't about convenience, right? Ordering an Uber, getting a Deliveroo, everyone will say that that's just a convenience culture thing. Whereas for me, the way I've always viewed a stadium environment is, I'm a fan, I've paid money to be there. And suddenly the onus on who's responsible for that experience lies much more on the venue for that reason. And my personal opinion on this is that venues could do a lot more to dictate that experience. So they can drive traffic away from their bars at half time, because they know that it's a poor experience for fans, if it means that they can serve people more either side of halftime, so through in-seat delivery or through click and collect or whatever it might be. These are just, this is the same concept as Ocado deliveries, right? You can't all order for Friday afternoon ready for a weekend shop, because they don't have enough delivery people. And similarly, people will take the concept of supermarket deliveries anyway and say, all the margins are squeezed and all that stuff. They still do it, and they still do it because they have to do it. And for me, I think that's the next step change in technology. I talked about incremental efficiencies over time. We've gone from tickets to cash to card to contactless. They're all great innovations, but they don't change the process of how people behave on a match day. And for me, I feel like venues can now step in to say, and look, if they need to use COVID and social distancing as an excuse to try these new things, it's the perfect opportunity to do so. Jake, sorry, I see you're there.
Hi,
good morning.
Jake. Sorry,
hey everyone.
that was, I think I had my settings incorrect there, so apologies.
No, that's okay. I was freaking out just for a moment that I had jumped into the wrong link or something, but technology is great except when it doesn't work.
Oh, exactly.
It's
The
awesome.
joy of technology, but it's great to have you with us. We were just saying, sort of like there's been so many trends in technology that we've been witnessing. Sorry, I'm just oh yeah. we were having another panelist wanting to join us then. As we were saying, the joys of technology. But, on the technology point, we've experienced so many different technologies over the last 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of what technology trend would be the one that you can see, okay, yes, well, that is going to translate into the sort of sports and venue environment when we reopen?
Sure. Well, I mean, Patrick already kind of touched on a really big one, which was the incremental efficiencies or steps being taken towards the concepts of mobile ordering or just moving about a facility. You pay your money to attend a match. That's what you ultimately want to do. You don't want to spend, 20, 30 minutes standing in line for a beer. So being able to leverage some of those ordering platforms, some of the analytical data, being able to potentially track user movement throughout a facility or see what wait times are going to be like or going to pick up. That's something that's just, it's already begun as a trend. I think it's only just going to accelerate at this point. The other big one that I deal with a lot, specifically with Ungerbach, as the venue operations, something that it's constantly, to my point, is, how are we doing on the facility preparations and operations, especially on the cleaning side. So similar to, the world that we lived in post 9/11 from a security standpoint, post pandemic, a lot of these cleaning procedures, certifications, mechanisms that we're putting into place now to welcome people back. I don't necessarily think that those are going to go away. I think they're just going to become commonplace. So the better, more efficient way that venues can not only clean the different common areas, but then also ensure the security of their fans, their patrons, through either enhanced technology in the food preparation side using UV light, enhanced HVAC systems that are going to filter out additional viruses, microbes, etc., and then just being able to track and those cleaning procedures. We've all been to the restroom where you see kind of the listing on the back of the door saying it was last cleaned at this date at this time, which is kind of hokey, but that always provided a little bit of a reassurance. I could definitely see facilities trying to bring that a little bit more to the forefront in terms of not only just with the restrooms, but just the common areas. When were they last cleaned? Just trying to be much more visible with that to provide that peace of mind so that patrons feel a little bit more comfortable coming back and they're not worried about, the pandemic or a spike in infections again at that point.
And sort of taking that then a step forward, sort of obviously in the US, I know there are certain states that are starting to reopen and to have, albeit smaller percentages of fans back in the venues. But from a sort of technological point of view, what would you sort of recommend to clubs and teams and venues as to the types of technology that they can be using to not only sort of create that buzz and excitement about returning, but ensuring that there is a safe, because people are going to go back once.
Yeah.
But if the if the experience isn't right, I'm sorry, that's it, they will not return. So how can they make sure that they return?
So just how they return, and I think in your previous session with the EuroLeague, one of the lines that stuck with me was, there really is no replacement for an in-person experience. That atmosphere, that excitement, that's something that you really can't replicate virtually. Now, if there has been a silver lining to the last 12 months, it's forced, I think, facilities and venues to think outside the box on how can we continue to engage virtually with our fans, and that's another trend that I think could ultimately still be it's still going to promenade a little bit moving forward. There's additional ways that we're going to be able to include and to keep other fans involved. Now, how do you include or improve that in-game experience or ensure that they want to come back? I think everyone's had a little bit of pandemic fatigue to where at the very front, it's going to be, I want to go somewhere, just because I want to get out of my house. I want to go someplace different. I want to watch my team be successful on the pitch or, on the field. But one of the other things I think you're going to see technology start to flow in. You're going to see a lot more investment into analytics, into big data, augmented reality potentially. That's why I think it's going to be incumbent on facilities, at least from the experience standpoint. You need to start looking at some of those different technologies and thinking about your communication, your efficiencies, your 5G networks that potentially need to be set up. I know, 5 years and even some facilities today, you can't get a signal when you're in the building because there's just too many coming in. So being able to increase the bandwidth to accommodate those and getting to those other additional platforms, that's, I think, going to be really important to necessitate users to come back and feel like, well, I'm getting something out of the in-person experience that I wouldn't necessarily get just sitting in my, in my chair at home, kind of thing. And I would think that that's also going to be incumbent on any kind of an efficiency expansion towards mobile ordering or just moving about the facility in general. Is you need to have the tech stack available on a match day to be able to support the bandwidth that ultimately is going to be demanded of you.
And sort of, again, sort of, do you think clubs and venues are going to need to invest in technology to, negate against future disruptions? I suppose we've all lived a relatively, as we now know, relatively charmed lives, but if the last 12 months has taught us anything, it's that fact is stranger than fiction, and, you need to be able to diversify, change, on a dime. So, how can they look to do that?
I think one of the things you need to look at is what's already happened. So again, going back to those DCMS pilot fixtures, there were a load of controls put on, unprecedented controls put on the fans that came, albeit in reduced numbers. We know that, but they were overlaid through the lens of safety. And going back to my earlier point about control, one of the big advantages of a digital world is that it's binary. You can segment the crowd into. I saw a video the other day of people boarding a plane, and they used to have zones A, B, and C, and then they call you up in order because it makes sense to load a plane from the rear. Obviously, it should be the same in stadiums. Of course, it should be, and particularly while we're coming out of this pandemic, because we need to be able to control who's accessing at what time in an orderly fashion. And this is the kind of thing that digital is so good at, because if you've got a digital ticket and you're not allowed in until 2:15, it just won't let you in until 2:15. And for whatever people say about what experience that might give, if the comms are right, then fans know about this and they will comply with it because they're desperate to get back. So I think one of the key things I've taken from today is opportunity. There's a key opportunity to take some of these, crisis measures. Innovation, a crisis is the mother of innovation. We all know that, and we've let too much opportunity go in the past. And I believe things like major events are a huge opportunity to try new things, and traditionally they've been too cautious to do so, because they want to make sure that the experience is right and that things don't mess up. But they still do, right? I mean, things don't. You have to try things, otherwise we get to a situation where it's Euro 2020 and they're looking at reduced crowds and everybody's sort of wondering, there's so much up in the air. And yet there's all this technology around to try and solve things, but none of it's tested. So there's a huge amount of caution involved. But, access, egress, definitely an opportunity. And going back to my point before, I mean, with venues dictating the terms at which you can engage with their front of house, it's huge. So if you get a text message saying, okay, your food's ready to pick up now, then you, or deliver it, obviously, even better, then there's never going to be queues at the bar, ever. Not even at half time, because they know that unless you've got a text saying that you can go and pick up your food, then it's not going to be ready for you. And people laugh and say, well, I just want a beer at half time. It's like, well, you're going to wait in a queue for 10 minutes. And more importantly, if you're a venue, you want to make more money out of that bar. So you want that bar to be busy for 2.5 hours, 3 hours of the match day, not 30, 40 minutes currently, which is what happens. So there are definitely balances to be made. But it's all about overlaying this digital control. Let's not call it restrictions, because that's not what it is. Restrictions are, licensing restrictions and existential things like that. COVID is a restriction. But digital a digital response can control that environment. The minute that you're writing something down, you're stapling something, you're printing something out, the ability to monitor that process disappears because it becomes manual. The minute you overlay a digital process, you can track every single step of whatever the journey is. This person downloaded the ticket then. It took them this long to get into the venue. When they were at the venue, they got through the turnstiles at that time. Once they're into the venue, they joined this queue, and it took them that long to get to the front. And then from the back end, how long did it take to pour this beer? How long did it take to every single part of that journey? Or from my perspective, delivery to the seat, we know everything. When did the order come? When was it grabbed? How long did it take to prepare? How long did it take to pick up? How long did it take to get delivered? How long did it take for the fans to reorder after that? Every single part of that journey is a data point that we can, it's not standalone, but we can feed it back into the ecosystem, which is, as Jake mentioned, just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Google say, every day they're smarter. It's absolutely right. Actually, I think that's one of the challenges with venues, is that there are so few events every other week. The margin, the time they have to learn about things is vastly decreased because there are far fewer events. So it's a challenge, but there are definitely opportunities out there through digital to implement controls that, in my opinion, desperately needed.
And I think you actually sort of hit a very vital point there, Patrick, and you, Jake. It's all well and good having these, the latest technology, but if you haven't set the parameters to collect the data, then it's not going to do what you want it to do. And I think if anything, we've learned that over the last 12 months that clubs and venues that hadn't necessarily focused on data capturing, perhaps were left behind a bit because the others were able to engage with fans and customers online. But anyway, so, moving forward then, sort of how can venues leverage technology to better serve their different stakeholders moving forward? Perhaps, Jake, you'd kick us off with that one.
Sure. So I think, kind of coming back to everything, the last 12 months have really focused a lot of venues, teams, facilities to take an inward look at themselves and their processes. How are we currently doing things? What does our staffing situation look like? What do we ultimately need to provide that flexibility needed to hedge against a future type of disruption? Because, hope to God that we don't have to live through something like this again. And who knows what the next type of disruption is going to look like. But I think it's important for everybody to at least have the frame of mind to think about utilizing and leveraging the technology in all aspects of the business, from a sales perspective to your operations, to your game day workers, to your order and food delivery, to your fan experience. Something like that is always going to be important. And I think dedicating certain individuals that are experts, within your, I think it ultimately helps to have kind of like an old school perspective of how have we treated these stakeholders, over time, how have we grown with this business to be, successful with them. And then you almost need to have a group of people that are, might think outside the box. And then it's important, I think, for everybody to kind of have that perspective of, okay, where do we see this in 5 years, in 10 years, et cetera? And we need to start moving on it now and investing in, whether it's trialing certain products, whether it's getting certain platforms invested, upgrading our IT infrastructure, whatever. It's making that initial investment up front so that as disruptions do come, you're able to accommodate them much more seamlessly than we were seeing in a lot of cases this last 12 months. Now, for certain, stakeholders, specifically, I deal a lot with suite owners where we want to increase the, the experience that they have. And it's not just, the back and forth emails, the back and forth phone calls. Ideally, if we're becoming more efficient with our staffing and others, we're not going to have the time and the day to necessarily continue that same type of pattern moving forward. So being able to create a technology solution that handles as many aspects in the communication pieces as we can, the back and forth, the pre-event ordering, the mobile ticketing, the attendee management for themselves, being able to track and digitalize all of those processes and interactions is just one example of how I think, you could leverage technology to specifically accommodate, better accommodate a particular stakeholder within the experience overall to make it better in that manner.
Yeah,
And
I think the only other thing I'd add is in terms of stakeholders, there are inevitably a lot of them, and I think it was mentioned before that there are some aspects of this crisis that, I mean, it's impacted across the board, right, which has involved people, stakeholders talking to each other like they never have before. But the answer lies in the question, right? You mentioned clubs, venues, and leagues. For me, if the last year's taught us anything, it's that existential threats like this require collective solutions. And from my perspective, it would be a lot easier if the leagues, the governing bodies, were more involved in these kinds of conversations, so that they could say, well, this concept is good for this application. So actually, if we can not just recommend it to our stakeholders, our clubs, our venues, but we can actually say, okay, well, we can marry it up with a sponsorship deal that's collective. These collective conversations have the potential to be far more impactful than the fragmented way that things are done, and the way apps are produced. The data never gets shared. Everything remains in silos. Whereas if everything feeds in for the betterment of the sport, the league, the club, each individual stakeholder within the club, then there's only benefit to everyone. It's not just about, a packed house isn't just a marketing win. It's a ticketing win, and F&B need to be connected to that. So there aren't any silver bullets for any of this, but technology does provide the kind of flexibility to adapt to things, the agility to deliver against them, often at short notice, and then thereafter the insight to learn and to grow from it. And there aren't many physical things where that can be done. If you're still with a paper ticket and taking cash, then that's the same way the Colosseum ran, right? That is literally how things used to run back then. Things need to change this day and age, because we all have a brick in our pocket that can do all this stuff now. And look, connectivity, we mentioned on it before, it's definitely one of these things that sits across different stakeholders. It's a temporary issue. 5G is coming, and it's going to overcome all of this stuff. And the sooner you have it, the better. Particularly now, while we're 2 months away from June the 21st, when everything's going to reopen.
And obviously, predominantly, I suppose we've been talking about sort of venues in match day or game day for you in America, Jake. But what about technology for non-match day? What does that like? How does that need to evolve? Jake, perhaps you can cover that one.
Sure. Well, in working with a lot of the clients here in the U.S. and even throughout the world, there really are no more down days, or at least that's the goal. Is that if the facility is sitting idle, then essentially we're losing money. So I think that there's going to be a continued focus to leverage those official match days to see and think about more creative ways that we can use the facilities, whether it's repurposing them for corporate or convention exhibitions, etc. I think that's going to be a continued push that we're going to ultimately see. And then from a venue standpoint as well, it's creating a lot more efficiency amongst our staff. It's moving them throughout the facility much more quickly, much more purposely, being able to record actions, tasks, things that need to get done, being able to track the analytics against it, which is only going to percolate down into scheduling, staffing, etc., which is ultimately going to be a money saver. I know a lot of venues here in the U.S. They furloughed the majority of their staffs. From down. From your concessions to your operations to your sales staff. I mean, a staff of 20 is now 2. And so we have to get more efficient before we can kind of build back up to those pre-pandemic levels. And so being able to leverage technology, it's a tool, it helps. If that's a way that can allow us to kind of be more cost effective and efficient in the short term before we build back up, that's going to be an important thing, I think, especially for those non-match days, where if you have the volume that you're dealing with, thinking historically, it's kind of an all hands on deck. We're going to provide the staffing that we need to get through it. But using technology, there might be a way for us to become much more efficient, and especially in those non-match days, being able to optimize our people's time so that we're not necessarily keeping, a larger overhead in place for work that we don't have to be done or is being done not as efficiently as it needs to. I keep using that word. I need to come up with a new synonym for efficient.
And what about you, Patrick? Could you be efficient for us with this one?
Oh, there you go.
Sure, I'll do my best. I mean, I suppose for me, I feel like it's not. They're two different businesses, right? Match day, non-match day are. I mentioned before about match days being an entirely unique operating environment. It is, so treat it like it. Don't try and apply non-match day technology to match days. It will fall down. There is no. It's been tried. Even I go so far as to say click and collect. It works for Amazon lockers, right? Amazon lockers are brilliant because everybody doesn't turn up at the same time. If they all turned up at the same time, they wouldn't work. So forget about trying to funge those concepts across to match days. And the other thing I'd say with technology and with providers, and I know I'm compromised because I am a supplier, but there's no one size fits all here. So don't expect to go to a company and say, okay, I want this, 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 and this. And the company will probably say, yes, we can do this. But the chances of all four things being best in breed, impossible, right? It's literally impossible. So what you want to try and do is build a platform that can slot other things into. And I'm a huge believer in the success of platforms and how, if you can't integrate into something else and you expect people to come and find you or download your app separately, it's a barrier that's never going to work. So you've got to be and actually Robert Fitzpatrick said it perfectly. You've got to fit into the integration potential for digital is a must. And then that's enterprise software, right? That is pretty much all it is. So don't expect your non-match day systems to work under a match day environment, and vice versa. Even I know that what we do. I know we could do a pub, but it's not optimized for a pub. We're optimized for a stadium. This is what we've been built for. So people always say, could you apply this to other things? Yeah, we could. It would work in a roundabout way, but it's overkill, right? You don't need to track the order from the bar to the table unless you're in a hospitality environment where you do. We need to know that it's table service versus general admission. So that's all I'd say is that treat them separately, and then they'll work. But don't be worried about them not working because it's all battle tested, and these reduced capacity environments are perfect to trial things. So I'd really urge people to look at the next 6 months as a huge opportunity to try and achieve those things that you've been looking at for the last 5 years.
And Jake, obviously we Patrick and I were having a chat earlier about, sort of the innovations and how he was working on different projects during the non-lockdowns. And I know Ungerbuck is a company that's been particularly hardworking over the last 12 months, doing all kinds of different things. And I know one of our delegates is actually from Manchester United, and they were telling me that they're just in the process of upgrading their Ungerbuck solution. So perhaps in a short about 2 minutes, you could just tell us about some of the things that you've been up to.
Sure. So kind of echoing, what Patrick had just said, using the next 6 months, what we have seen, with a lot of our clients on their end is the upgrading of their sites, the upgrading to latest versions of the software, which gives us a lot more flexibility as we layer in additional functionalities. That's something critical that we see kind of neglected by a lot of our teams and clients is we're on one version and we're comfortable, so don't force us, kind of a thing. But what our teams have really been kind of focusing on is really trying to ease the reopening procedure, especially over the last 6 months. So we're trying to roll out different functionalities that relate to task management for cleaning, visitor tracking for registration and certain events, it's not intended to scale for a 60,000 seat stadium, but for your different special events, it definitely is going to fit the bill there. Being able to incorporate better spacing with room diagramming, even the virtual event platform that we're on today is something that Ungerbach has been trying to focus on to provide, those additional, digital functionalities that are going to help our venues kind of ease back into the overall opening of their facilities. Again, they're not meant to be the end all be all. Not from a technology standpoint. I think Patrick made a very good point in that they're tools, and it's going to be incumbent on venues to continue researching, learning. But we've definitely expanded our portfolio and what we're able to provide from an end-to-end experience for all of our clients across the entire venue space.
So thank you to both of you. I know we could talk about this an awful lot longer, but unfortunately I could see one of the next panelists for the next session is eager to talk about F&B. So I thank the two of you for taking part. I'm looking forward very much to seeing both of you in person in Liverpool this September. So thanks for now. Maybe you want to do just one last, if you could give sort of one sort of key thought that sort of venues should be thinking about now as they sort of prepare to reopen, and the technology piece, what would it be?
Oh, I would just simply say look to September last year and learn from what the venues did then, and try and apply the learnings from that, because we've known for some time how things are going to look. We just don't know when. And we were given a little bit of clarity a couple of weeks ago, but that just means we've got time now. That's all I'd say.
And I would say keep learning, learn from your peers, learn from your fans, your patrons. Keep investing in technology, and we'll ultimately have these tools to get us through this, and soon enough we'll be back to a state of whatever normal is going to be moving forward, and look forward to kind of that experience with everybody.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Here's to the new normal and new tech in the new normal. And I'll see you both soon.